Okay, so now we are in section 2.4, being able to write equations of lines. Uh, there are different ways that we can write an equation for a line, one of which is putting it into slope-intercept form. Another way is to write it into point-slope form. Both situations we have seen in the past, and so this is kind of a review on how to solve those equations. First off, I want to be able to solve each of these equations into slope-intercept form. I want to put these examples into the uh, equation y equals mx plus b. So, for example 1, I have a slope of -7, and my y-intercept is at 0, comma, -9. So I can write this as y equals, my m is -7, so I substitute that in for m. So I got y equals -7x plus my y-intercept here is 9. So I write in 9. So my equation here would be y equals -7x plus 9. So for number 2, if you get a graph, and what they've done here is they've given me the point of my y-intercept, and they've also given me a point on the graph, which is 2 comma -3. Now, if you're given the graph, you could just count the rise over run, or you could use the slope equation, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So if I pretend that this is x1 and y1, and this is x2 and y2, I can find myself doing it that way. So if I say that this is -6 minus a -3 divided by um, 0 minus 2, this equals what, plus plus, gives me a -3 divided by a -2. Got two negatives here, so that makes it a positive 3 over 2. So when I write this equation, I know that my slope is 3 over 2x minus 6. And that is how I write the equation for this particular problem. So again, the other form of writing is putting it into point slope form. And here's the general formula for point slope form, where it's y minus y1 equals m, which is slope, times the quantity x minus x1. So x1 and y1 are points on a graph, and then the slope is m. So if I looked at example 1, here I have a slope of -2/3, and I got a point of -9 comma 7. So all I'm doing is substituting in these values into the point slope equation. So I have y minus whatever y1 is, what happens to be 7, equals -2/3 times the quantity x, and it's going to be minus a -9. But since I got two negatives, that becomes plus. So technically it's y minus 7 equals -2/3 times quantity x plus 9. Here, for example 2, I'm going to go y plus 11 equals 6 times the quantity x plus 2. And that is how I can write that in point slope form. For this example, I want to write an equation of a line through the point 8 comma 5, and I want that line to be parallel to the equation y equals 1/4 x plus 10. So at the end of the day, I want to write an equation that's in y equals mx plus b form. They give us some parameters. one of which is that the line must be parallel. So, from what we talked about in days prior, for a line to be parallel, they must have the same slope. So for our equation, my m for this one should be 1/4, because since this equation has a slope of 1/4, so is our new equation going to have to be. But other thing that we know is that it crosses at point 8 comma 5. So before I can put it into slope-intercept form, I must put it into point-slope form in order to solve the equation first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first put it into point-slope form. So I'm going to have y minus 5 equals 1/4 times the quantity x minus 8. From here, I can distribute my 1/4 to my x minus 8 and then solve accordingly. So now I can say that's y minus 5 equals 1/4 x minus 2. Because if I multiply this here and multiply that there. Next thing, I'm going to try to get y by itself. So I'm going to add 5 to both sides. So that cancels here. So that leaves me with y equals 1/4 x plus 3. And that is the answer to our equation. It fits because it is parallel, we have the same slope, and also it crosses at point 8 comma 5. This next example is, again, we're going to write an equation in y equals mx plus b form, and the point that it crosses is at negative 6 comma 20. But the stipulation here is that it's perpendicular to y equals negative 3/5 x minus 4. So what we talked about the other day for lines to be perpendicular is that it must be the negative reciprocal. So we have to flip the fraction, change the sign. And so when we flip the fraction, change the sign of this slope, our new m for this equation is going to be a positive 5/3. I flipped the fraction, I changed the sign. It was regularly negative 3/5, and so my perpendicular slope would be 5/3. From here, I'm going to put it into point slope form and then be able to get it into slope-intercept form. So I have y minus 20 equals 5/3 times the quantity x plus 6. From here, I can distribute that 5/3, so I'm going to say y minus 20 equals 5/3 x plus 10. I'm going to add 20 to both sides. So this leaves me with y equals, because we're going to get y by itself, 5/3 x plus 30. And here we have it. We have our y um, by itself. This slope is perpendicular to this one, and it crosses at negative 6 comma 20. Last thing I want to talk about is trying to put it into the y equals mx plus b form when we are just given 2 points. Okay? First off, we need to find the slope. We can find the slope by using our slope equation where we got the y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So if I just create these points here, I can say that 16 minus 7 divided by negative 4 minus 8 will give us the slope. And this would be what? 9 over negative 12. If I put this in lowest terms, it'll be a negative 3/4. Okay? Now, before I can get it into this form, I must put it into point slope form, very similar like I did in the examples prior. But because I'm giving 2 points, I can use either point to help me solve this equation. It does not matter. I should get the same thing. So let's say if I use negative 4 and 16, for example. So so if I go y minus 16 equals a negative 3/4 times the quantity x plus 4, and now I can distribute, so I have y minus 16 negative 3/4 x minus, that would be, what's that, negative 3. So from here, I can add 16 to both sides. So it gives me y equals negative 3/4 x plus 13. So if you don't believe me, let's use this one to help us out. So I'm going to use point slope form with 8 comma 7. So I'm going to say y minus 7 equals negative 3/4 times quantity x minus 8. And so I'm going to distribute negative 3/4 x minus, or actually this will be a plus 6, because 24 divided by 4 is 6. So now I'm going to add 7 to both sides. So that gives me y equals negative 3/4 x plus 13. These two match. So again, it does not matter which one it is. You're going to get the same equation. Looking at the last one, I want a little bit more room. So I have 2 points, negative 8 and 20, and negative 6 and 15. So again, I'm going to get my x1, y1, x2, y2 identified. So I'm going to say it's 15 minus 20 divided by negative 6 minus a negative 8. This is where we're going to find our m. So I go plus plus here. This gives me a negative 5. Up here gives me a positive 2. So it's 5 halves, negative 5 halves. Now I'm going to use one of these 2 points. I'm going to use negative 8 and comma 20 for my point slope form. So that gives me y minus 20 equals a negative 5 over 2 times the quantity x plus 8. So to get it into y equals mx plus b form, I'm going to distribute that negative 5 halves to the x plus 8. So that gives me y minus 20 equals negative 5 over 2x minus, so what, 5 times 8 is 40, divided by 2 is 20. So now I'm just going to add 20 to both sides. That gives me y equals, this from 0 to just a negative 5 halves x. And that's it. And that is being able to write equations using slope-intercept form and point slope form. Hope this helps. Until next time.